Pro-democracy demonstrators are planning to choke travel routes to Hong Kong's international airport after a chaotic night of running battles between police and protesters. Protest organisers have urged the public to overwhelm road and rail links in the airport, potentially disrupting flights. Our correspondent Patrick Fok is monitoring the protests. Let's now cross live to him. Very good morning to you, Patrick. What's the latest? What can you tell us?
Well, you know, there's some really quite incredible scenes taking place right here after the violence that we saw last night. That didn't deter the protesters from coming out today for this planned action to disrupt airport travel services. And I'm stood about 2 kilometers away from the departure halls at Hong Kong International Airport, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of protesters streaming back and forth. They've already been up to the airport and caused some disruption there. They're now heading towards the close-by town of Tung Chung, so we expect there to be some unrest to take place a little bit later on. You know, at the moment, people are being drummed along the road there. The traffic has been blocked altogether. You can see behind me there are barricades have been set up blocking the cars from coming into the airport. So very frustrating indeed for a lot of the people actually trying to get to the airport. And if they're not there and they're flying in the next hour or two, it's highly unlikely that they're going to make their flight. The airport express train, which brings people from town to the airport here, has also been shut off. The government has told the mass transit railway company to shut down services altogether. So there have actually been some trains running, but there are no passengers aboard at all. So for the time being, it looks as though the protesters have succeeded in creating this sort of disruption that's going to put pressure on the government to respond to their demands.
How long is this protest expected to go on for, Patrick?
Well, we simply don't know. You know, these things just happen, as we've seen in the days and weeks that have gone by, that they just happen very organically. And I don't want to say that there's no strategy at all, but they seem to be coming up with the direction of these protest movements on the spot. So that makes it very difficult for authorities to know exactly how to deal with these situations. And all they can really do is try and take as many precautions as possible. And, you know, as I said earlier, we saw some very violent scenes take place last night, and you know, there's some ugly scenes that took place in the underground. Lots of protesters were beaten with batons, and pepper spray was fired inside the carriages, and 40 people were arrested as well. You know, I dare say that that may even have spurred the protesters to come out and motivated them to show themselves and be heard once again.
With the latest protest, do we know if it's safe for commuters? Even though there is a blockage, are people allowed to go through if they insist?
Well, look, the simple answer is we just don't know what it's going to be like. It is really quite peaceful for the time being, and you know, people that were at the airport terminal earlier on were still letting passengers get through. So we don't know at this time whether or not flights have been disrupted, but it is very difficult indeed for passengers to actually reach the airport in the first place. How things pan out over the course of the day, we just don't know. It could very well turn violent, and one indication that might happen is that, you know, as we've seen in the past, when protesters are dressed up in protective gear and face masks, normally that is a sign that there is going to be some sort of confrontation. And you know, the motorway leading up to the airport is absolutely crawling with police. So there's a lot of police around the area. There are so-called raptors, strategic sort of forces to control rioters, and no doubt there are going to be some sort of clashes that will take place a little bit later on.
Any latest official reaction from government, especially from those reported deaths yesterday?
Well, look, I mean, quite simply, supporters of the government have come out and said that they absolutely approve of the police action, and the police incidentally said that they thought the force that was used in the underground last night, where some of those nasty scenes took place, was appropriate, an appropriate response to what was happening there. You know, there were protesters that were graffitiing the stations and damaging some of the facilities in there, and also getting into altercations with other passengers as well. So that was the police response. But at the same time, you know, the pan-democrats, the pro-democracy movements have been very critical. You know, at the moment, we keep on saying that this is a crisis which requires a political solution. That just simply isn't forthcoming, and all we've seen is this cycle, this escalation of violence, because as the protesters have upped their resistance, the police have responded with more force, and that's just not getting us anywhere at all. And you know, if it continues, you know, the likelihood is that something really bad is going to happen. So far, nobody's died in a protest, but that's something that people are talking about. And it's also quite clear that this protest movement is going to overlap with the October 1st anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. That's exactly what Beijing won't have wanted to happen. But, you know, for the time being, it does not look as though this protest movement is going to end anytime soon at all.
Patrick, as we're speaking to you, we just heard an overpass. Can you confirm that that's an airplane, and does it mean that there actually is movement? Flights are going in and out?
Yeah, as far as we know, the flights are still going in and out, and you're absolutely right, there are planes flying overhead, but you know, like I say, we just don't. In fact, there's another one just going overhead now. You'll be able to hear that, no doubt. But we just don't know what's going to happen later. I mean, I will say this, that the protesters don't seem to be moving towards the airport now. So it looks as though they could be focusing on Chungcheong, the town that I mentioned a moment ago. And, you know, after this, we're going to be heading down over there to see exactly what's happening. But I would expect that that's where the site of the clashes might take place a little bit later today.
Patrick, when this process started, we saw a huge number of protesters coming out. Are there still numbers? Is it breaking down a bit, or is it growing momentum?
No, as far as I can see, it absolutely isn't breaking down. And funny that you mentioned that. There's reports in local media today saying that some of the people that joined the rally yesterday were first-time demonstrators, and you know, that's a worrying indicator for the government. You know, we've already got hundreds of thousands of people that are very much in support of this movement, and there are more people joining on board. You know, whether or not this peters out, we don't know, but you know, the government had indicated previously that they thought the start of school term, which is going to be tomorrow, might see the movement die down a bit. But you know, there is a class boycott that's going to be going on. There's also strike action that's going to be taking place tomorrow and Tuesday. So it doesn't seem that this is going to stop anytime soon, as I say.
Thanks for talking to us this morning, Patrick Fok. You're watching The Agenda. Let's take a break. We'll be back in a moment.